I'm Taylor Phillips. He's Ed Smith, and welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Got lots to talk about, including the Lions offseason. My goodness, they have stocked up on defense. We'll talk about the Red Wings 7-game regulation losing skid, which has nothing to do with anything else outside the rink. And we'll touch on the Pistons, who have been a little bit better, playing a little bit better as of late. The Tigers' pitching staff and the lowlights of Javier Baez, of course. Plus a little bit of college basketball, and that'll be it. So, trending truth: the Lions extend head coach Dan Campbell and general manager Brad Holmes. They earned it.
Absolutely, really no complaints you can say about this move. It was announced that Coach Campbell was already signed on a deal. I believe it was a 6-year deal when he first signed his deal in 2021. I believe him and Brad Holmes had the same kind of deal, and they both got an extension today. So them, along with Chris Spielman, who is the special assistant to the president and to Sheila Ford and whatnot, he also got an extension. So which is more than fun, because this is the core group of individuals that, frankly, are the reasons, or I should say, the foundation pieces for what this team, for the identity of this team, and the culture of this team has embodied and has become. And you've seen the transformation in just the 3 years under this administration. So to see them get their extensions, especially when you consider the fact that they won the division title last year, got to the NFC Championship game, doing this in year 3 of this tenure, when you consider the fact of how rock bottom this organization was at the end of the last regime with Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. So I got no problems, no complaints about this. It was the right move. It shows how committed you are and invested you are to this group and to this this regime in terms of wanting to get things done. Obviously, things are not complete yet, but you do understand and do like the direction that things are going at. So this was the right move to make, for sure.
Oh, yes. And we have breaking news on Dylan Larkin, by the way, but we'll get to him later. But the Lions, they were. It was just the beginning for them. Let me tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
The Lions signed Vikings/Saints defensive end Marcus Davenport to a 1-year contract, and we begin this free agency signings list with our "What's Your Grade" segment. Ed, what is your grade on Marcus Davenport?
I'll give this one a B minus, either C, high C plus, low B minus. I think this one gives you some depth on the defensive line for sure. Marcus Davenport, if you can remember, before he played last year with Minnesota, he had spent, I believe, his first 5 years in the league with the Saints. Let's not forget that 3 of those first 5 years was with Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn as his coaches that he played under during his time with the Saints. So it's not a surprise to see him reunite with those two in this way. Also gives you a depth piece to use on the defensive line. The experience is there. The ability to get to the quarterback is there. Be a disruptive force, because he's been enough of a force during his time in New Orleans when he was healthy. At least he was one of the best at his position. So I think the theme of what I've been wanting to see the Lions do on the defensive line is get guys that will give Aiden Hutchinson the help that he needs to perform more and not worry so much about being double teamed and triple teamed all game long. This is one guy who may not be able, his role may not be able to do that, but at least he is a good complementary player to what you need to do on that defensive line. Because while they weren't as successful as getting to the quarterback as they would have liked, you would like them to be, they were at least very much improved with stopping the run. And I think it was a key theme, if you notice, with what they also did with the defensive line in this with their other free agency signing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then we got a trade. Something new called "What's Your Trade Grade?" Something a little new. The Lions trade a 2024 third-round pick to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for cornerback Carlton Davis III and 2 6th-round draft picks, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. What's your trade grade, Ed?
I'm gonna give this one a B plus. I think for what you had to give up to get a guy like Carlton Davis, I think is um, not a bad not a bad haul to give up. I would say, um, considering what you get in return and what you could use some of those returning pieces to what you could potentially do either in this year's draft or whatever. Bundle them together to maybe move up a spot or two. That could be a possibility. But in terms of what you're getting alone in Carlton Davis, I think easily compared to what the other makes that you saw being done throughout the secondary, both additions and subtractions, that this is simple. Carlton Davis is going to be your new CB1. He's going to be the guy that's going to be tasked and targeted with going after guys like Mike Evans, like Puka Nacua, like Christian Watson, like DJ Moore. And most especially when you're dealing with him in our division twice a year, guys like Justin Jefferson. He's the guy that you're saying, okay, this dude is the X on this team. I need you to go after this guy, shadow him, because we saw last year Cam Sutton, that was not his natural role. He's much more comfortable, I should say, in a CB2 role. He was put in that spot due to the injuries early on to both Emmanuel Mosley and CJ Gardner-Johnson. Now the fact that you brought back Mosley, the fact that you made this deal with Carlton Davis, and of course another move that you made that we'll get into shortly, that takes that pressure off Sutton. He can be, again, that CB2 spot. He's not going to have to be worrying about taking on the number one receiver of the team on game long, because you saw how it was working against Detroit throughout the course of the season. So the expectation and hope is if you get guys like this in your secondary, you know where they'll put Sutton in a better spot amongst the defense, amongst the secondary, and also shifting a couple of guys along your safeties like Joseph and Branch, for example. But I very much like this move, depth purposes, and I think also you consider the fact that Davis performs much better, I should say, doing man-to-man coverage, which is a little bit surprising considering the fact that remember, he's coming from Tampa, a team that almost heavily relied on zone defense. Now you're coming into a situation in Detroit where they're going to rely more on man to man, and frankly, that fits into Davis' specialty in terms of the stats that he's allowed, the numbers that he's given up, or I should say the lack of numbers that he's given up based on his style of play and how he plays certain people. Jamar Chase, the star wideout for the Cincinnati Bengals. He had mentioned that the best player to have covered him so far in his career was Carlton Davis. Same Carlton Davis who had himself a damn good game against Justin Jefferson last year. Same Carlton Davis who pretty much made Keenan Allen non-existent, which is noteworthy considering the fact that the Bears saw what Keenan Allen did to the Lions last year in that Chargers game, and they made a deal for him to get a trade to get him over onto their squad. So trust me, between teams like the Bears and the Vikings and the Packers making the moves that they've done so far, it's about one thing. It's targeting Detroit because they want to get their hands on the NFC North crown. So what the Lions are doing right here, what they're doing is trying to make an upgrade what they know as a weakness at, while also focusing on other areas that may require more strengthening. I think you're going to see them get to that in due time. But for this move, I like it. B+ for this trade.
Oh, yeah. Same here. The Lions have signed Las Vegas Raiders cornerback Amik Robertson to a 2-year, $9.25 million contract at least $9.25 million, according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. Ed, what's your grade?
Give this one an even B, maybe a B-. Robertson is someone you could put on the opposite field from Carlton Davis. While, like I said, be more in that Cam Sutton type of role, CB2 nickel slot guy. Again, he has shown his own versatility in his own production. I think there's even highlights of him doing his work against the Packers because he was doing a fine job against Christian Watson, including getting a pick off of Jordan Love. So, I'm sure the Lions were studying that tape. That was probably played into their decision-making to an extent of why they wanted to bring him here. But his style is a compliment. He's physical. He's a hard hitter. And frankly, when you have guys like Ife Melifonwu, you're going to be bringing in as a blitzer, as a guy like Brian Branch who likes to come up and stop the run. His style fits perfectly for what this team is trying to do, and I think you can see him being someone who's crucial in getting those key open field tackles as well, which was really bothersome for the Lions late in the postseason. So, no much complaint about it. And also look at the amount of money that you're paying him too. I have no complaints about this. So B, instead of a B minus, I'll give it an even solid B. Yeah, I really like this
Yeah,
one.
I would have to agree. A mid-range B.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Lions signed Cincinnati Bengals big guy defensive tackle DJ Reader to a 2-year, $27.25 million contract, according to ESPN's Eric Woodard and Schultz. I'd give this one at least a mid-range A, maybe if not an A plus. Ed.
I will give this an A minus due to the fact that you have to remember that Reader for his talent and what he brings to the table, he is coming off of a quadriceps injury. I believe he has injuries in both his quads that he has torn before.
Wow.
Yeah, but he was still able to play 14 games last season. You've seen that when he is healthy, when he is able to be productive, he's frankly one of the best defensive tackles, in all of football. And when you put him on a line next to a Lee McNeil, that alone makes a team that was already difficult to run the ball on that much more difficult. And frankly, he has also shown himself to be a guy that can get after the quarterback as well, which is frankly what you need when you're playing next to Aiden Hutchinson. It doesn't matter if he's going to be on the edge or in the interiors at the tackles. If you have another guy that's getting to the quarterback, at least maybe not to the level extent as how Aiden is doing it, but at least he's trying to keep up with them in terms of a respectable pace. Not to mention the fact that you do have James Houston that you bring in on situational downs, situational pass rushes and third downs. They even clarified that themselves regarding about how they feel about Houston's role in this team. So this was again another aspect of trying to fix your D line. You're already strengthening of strength, as in this. No one can, frankly, this was the best run defense in the league last year, and now they've made that aspect of their defense even more better. So to me, I'm giving this one.
Yes, even better. Yeah.
I'm giving this an A minus based on the fact that I want to make sure that Reader is going to be able to be on the field long enough to be productive. But when he's on, man, he's on. And if you've seen his press conference earlier today, he seems like the right guy that's a perfect fit for this locker room. He's mentioned what it's like to play with guys like Lee McNeil, playing with guys like Aiden. He sounds very much excited to and wants to be here, which is the type of energy, the type of culture that you want players to feel when they come here. So, again, another credit to Dan Campbell, Brett Holmes, and Chris Spielman for building that from the ground up to where we're getting guys like DJ Reader, we're getting guys like Carlton Davis to that extent.
Yes, because the defensive line needs at least some help, and that was big, humongous, right there by Brad Holmes. Oh yeah. So those are it for this week's free agent signings for the Lions. They've re-signed Graham Glasgow to a 3-year, $20 million contract with $9.5 million guaranteed, according to Schefter. And they've re-signed offensive lineman Dan Skipper and defensive lineman John Kaminsky, each to 1-year deals. Kaminsky is going to earn $2.5 million. No word on how much Dan Skipper is going to earn unless I go to Spot Track.
It may just be a vet minimum deal, so it won't be anything too much to tack against the salary cap. And it's worth noting that that Kaminsky, he took that $2.5 million. That was his way of taking a discount so that the team could have more money freed up to go everywhere else. Like, for example, bringing back Grant Glasgow, which I think was important because let's not forget, you've now lost Jonah Jackson to the Rams, and it's not a guarantee that Vitae is going to be coming back either. So getting back Grant Glasgow was very much important to your offensive line in more ways than one. And, in a little bit of a, I guess you could say, a preview for what I think I'm going to talk about next week, it does lead some to believe that, hey, maybe the Lions, whether it be first round, second round, whatever, they could be thinking of, hey, we need to get ourselves another offensive lineman. Just saying, because that was their biggest strength. For a reason. It opened up their running game. It gave Jared Goff the protection that he needed, as well as opening up things in the play action department. Trust me, where this offensive line goes is where the team goes. And while you know that you have a gem in Penei Sewell locked up for the next decade or so, you know eventually what? You're gonna have to replace Frank Ragnow. You're gonna have to replace Taylor Decker. You're gonna you've already knowing that you have to replace Jonah Jackson. You may have to replace Vaitai as well. This is a team that had to go through multiple shifts in their offensive line with starting lineups week after week last year. And you know what? They were still able to produce at the level they were to produce, which speaks to how well they were coached and how perfect they ran their offense. But now you want to make sure that your biggest strength is at more of a strength for this upcoming season and beyond. So it comes down to seeing what bringing back who you can bring back that were going to be free agents. Guys like Skipper, guys like Glasgow, and also seeing what you can get in the draft. And I'll be getting into that more next week because I think there's a good bevy of offensive linemen that you can draft for this class.
Of course. And speaking of departures, Jonah Jackson, of course, signs with the Rams, $34 million, 3 years. The Lions also lost defensive back C.J. Gardner-Johnson to a 3-year contract worth up to a maximum of $33 million, according to Schefter. So CJGJ is back in Philly.
You know what? I'm not really too mad at this move because this seems like a deal that CJ wanted. As much as I would have liked to have him back in Detroit, it seems from what we got from Davis and Robertson.
Amik Robertson, yes.
From Davis and Robertson, it's not a surprise to see this contract for CJ in terms of years and money. I think what CJ was asking for was probably a little bit too much more than what the Lions felt or wanted to do in this regard. So there's like, okay, let's make these moves instead. And frankly, one of the moves that Philly's been making, CJ was probably better needed in Philly elsewhere when you consider the fact that, hey, while the Lions were making moves, with their secondary, the CB room was getting a little bit crowded. So it's not really too much of a surprise to me, at least, see CJ gone. I know some people will think, hey, at least that stupid ski mask gimmick is gone. But I like the energy and attitude that CJ brought to the team. I do wish, though, he was more focusing on making team first plays as opposed to his vendetta against Deebo Samuel in the NFC Championship game. That could have gone a long way towards helping our performance in that. But still, got none but love for his contributions here. I wish him the best of luck in Philly, but it's clear that the team is going to want to go in a different direction. And frankly, we already talked about last week of how they could still very much go corner in the draft. So I think it's still very much a possibility, even with the moves that we've seen them made this week.
Yeah. Speaking of the draft, we now discuss who the Lions should particularly draft at defensive line. So, Ed, who you got?
Well, we went into detail last week, Taylor, of how the prospects that were available for the Lions for them to potentially draft at cornerback in the secondary spot. This is before we saw them make the moves that they made with Robertson and with Davis, and that they still could make as a result. But now focusing this week, because we just mentioned earlier the signing of DJ Reader, now the Lions could probably still focus on making improvements on their defensive line. And there's plenty of players, a few players that you can do and get in this draft class that could be a big benefit for you. I think there's two players at the very least that are at the top of mind. I think a lot of other players, a lot of people's big boards and mock drafts concerning what the Lions could do, particularly at this spot in the draft, since they're picking 29. So if they decide not to trade up, if they decide to potentially stay where they're at, you're looking at one or possibly both of these guys being available for you if that situation arises. And this is particularly on the defensive line of things. It's Chop Robinson, edge rusher from Penn State, Darius Robinson, edge rusher from Missouri. And frankly, us, being in Big Ten country here, there's not much you need to go on about what Chop Robinson brings to the table. Elite level speed, athleticism, tremendous ability to dip around the edge, and with immense ferocity. And frankly, you saw how he was doing against Michigan early on, just like from the first couple snaps of the game, to where it forced the Wolverines to completely change the whole dynamic of their game plan of what they were going to do in terms of bringing the extra offensive linemen to running the ball almost damn near every single play, because they did not want to put J.J. McCarthy in a vulnerable spot with Chop Robinson coming around the edge. So I think that speaks to a level of respect that Michigan had for Penn State's defense to an extent, and also how, let's not forget also that JJ did get hurt in that game. But still, I digress. Chop Robinson is still one of the best defensive linemen. Well, you could say arguably the best edge rusher in all the Big Ten last year. And frankly, between his combine numbers and what he did earlier today at his pro day, showing off that he can run sub 4.5, 40-yard dash speed. He's 6 foot, what was it, 6'3", 255. So he's like around the right, the right size that you want for an edge rusher to use his athleticism to get to the quarterback. He's a guy, if you put on the opposite side of Aiden Hutchinson, you've essentially found his David Ojabo. And you can also say, to an extent, about Darius Robinson from Missouri. This guy is an athletic stud himself, 6'5", 295. Can come at you like an absolute bull in a china shop at times. Very aggressive. The way he talks and how he describes his style of play, very much in line for what Dan Campbell and what Aaron Glenn will be wanting to look for in their defense. And also, I think it's worth pointing this out. He's got local ties. He was, I believe, from Southfield area. His mom tweeted out a picture some time ago of Darius when he was a little boy. He was a Lions fan himself. Grew up a Lions fan. In fact, so much that there was a picture that his mom tweeted of him meeting or getting an autograph signed by Nick Fairley when Nick Fairley was here. So that speaks to the level of dedication of Darius Robinson's fandom, I would say, to rooting for the Detroit Lions. Now you're telling me he has a potential opportunity to play for his hometown team and at a position of need as well. So that's two potential players I could see at that first round / 29 pick spot, assuming the Lions, either don't trade up or trade down or make some type of trade or whatever the case may be. If they stay put, one or both of those guys could be available at 29. In terms of guys you can look for in the second and third round, I will selfishly have to throw in the name Chris Jenkins. I think he could be a solid depth piece to bring on that defensive line. You may call him my Michigan bias. I don't care. I knew he was a big part of a defense that just went 15-0 and won the national championship. Same thing with Mike Sanders still, who I mentioned last week in depth. So if I'm going to talk about Mikey, I'm going to talk about Chris. And he was one of our best defensive players. He didn't get too much of attention late in the season because we saw guys like Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham turn to absolute monsters of men in the middle. So it took a little bit of the attention off of Jenkins, but trust me, his awareness, his ability to get to the quarterback, very much appreciated during his time in Ann Arbor, and I think will be much appreciated at the next level, depending on where he goes, who picks him up. You're getting a good player that has good smarts and good tendencies and good intangibles around him. So those are a few of a litany of defensive line talent that could be available. And I'm sure I'm missing a couple off the top of my head, but still, there's a very I should say a variety of options that the Lions could consider if they want to bolster the defensive line, which I think they should at some point in this draft.
Yeah. All right. That sounds like a good list. That can help out DJ Reader, Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, James Houston, and others.
And Marcus Davenport, since he's the new addition as well.
Yes.
John Kaminsky.
Yes. John Kaminsky, yes. So that's Lions. Well, what do you know? The Red Wings lost 7 straight in regulation, but they're not done yet in the standings. Fans are already throwing in the towel and blaming a harmless little sponsorship jersey patch. I know it's priority waste management. It doesn't matter. It has less than zero effect on ice play. Fans need a STFU and just criticize their own team. Stop talking about curses and shit.
Listen, I'm one that's all for superstition in some instances, in some cases, especially when I feel it just has the right vibe to it. This does not have any type of connection whatsoever to what the Red Wings are doing on the ice. It comes down to lack of preparation, lack of, I would say, what's the word I'm looking for?
Mental toughness, I guess.
Mental toughness could be one, I would say, yes, but too many slow starts is another. For some reason, they're just not getting that initial burst out the gate. They're letting other teams score first far too many times. They have to rely on coming back from deficits far too many times. And when you're doing that and knowing that, hey, there's going to be nights where your goaltending is not going to always be at its best, despite the type of job that Alex Lyon has done. He's not going to always be at his best. So what happens when you combine that with lack of effort, lack of explosive effort, I should say, and also a defense that has been shoddy at best throughout times of this season, now continuing to fail itself. And also you're doing this without your best player, without your captain who's been on the injury list, for a lower body injury. So combine all those factors, and you get the mess of what you're at right now. Now it's leading to the fact that we got players fighting each other in practice because they're frustrated. They're pissed off about this too. And I get it. At least it shows that they are aware. At least it shows that they care. At least it shows that, they understand that this is unacceptable. But, fighting each other in practice is one thing. Take that same energy out to these other teams.
Right. Exactly. Even Jim Costa of 97.1 told fans to stop blaming the patch and Jeff Rieger's bald haircut. Jeff Rieger was earlier this week was just catching up to that.
Gone wrong. Just a troll gone wrong. And frankly, people are just buying, like you said, buying into this way too seriously. It's not that deep, people. Stop it.
Yeah. Just come back to the real world. Stop playing around. If you're gonna complain to us about it, you can bite us.
Right. Be more worrisome about the fact that, hey, Eisman is not probably. I would say this. In terms of certain players, certain people not being brought up yet, like an Edvinson, for example, could be one guy. I'm waiting to see when Bergeron is going to be brought up. Those could be
Bergen?
guys.
Yeah,
Bergen.
I thought he was called up already, but the lack of preparation, like you touched on, that falls on the head coach Derek Lalonde.
Exactly. That's got to fall on the coach at some point too, because if you're not getting the players in the right spot mentally, they're not going to be able to be at their best physically. And I think it's been showing in this losing streak for some reason. Now, again, I'm not going to be all abandoned ship on Derek Lalonde now because he has been at the helm of the ship to where we've gone to this point. It could also be a spot, Taylor. We got to remember this team had its own coming back down to earth moment last season against Ottawa. We may very well be seeing that repeating itself here. I know fans don't want to hear that, but you got to remember there was a reason why Eisman decided to stay pat at the deadline. Between combination of players that he feel that coming back from injury / bringing up from Grand Rapids, that's how he feels are in essence those deadline acquisitions, and they're
sort of stayed pat. He made one trade, Clint Costin to the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, but it wasn't really too much of a buyer. They weren't as much of buyers as
it did make room for Jonathan Berggren. They called him up. as a
Yeah,
result. That was
but
smart
yeah,
enough.
but like I said, they weren't as making enough moves to where I thought people would, I and many people thought they would be considered buyers at this point because they were sellers last season for good reason. We were thinking maybe of how they were performing up to this point, they could probably be buyers, but Eisman obviously is doing that for a reason, and he probably sees that listen, this team is still making good strides. You want to hope they could try and get to the playoffs at least this year. Maybe they're a year early ahead of schedule of terms of what they want to be from the development standpoint. But still, it is at least disappointing to see, see this momentum that they've taken and waste it. And now, and the fact that Dylan Larkin has been out, that doesn't help as well. But you can't use that as a crutch. You got all these other players on your roster. Someone else has got to step up with the captain gone.
Well, speaking of Dylan Larkin, he actually practiced earlier Friday and he could return soon. So, Red Wings fans, hang tight. Don't fret yet. Don't throw in the towel yet. He's going to come back really soon. It's already been a couple weeks. Dylan Larkin's lower body injury was going to last a couple weeks, and that happened 2 weeks ago at home against the Florida Panthers in a 4-0 loss at home. Remember. So, if you do the math, you should know Dylan Larkin is going to come back soon.
But even still, he has to play better himself too, because they were losing games before he went out. So,
they lost one game. They only lost a couple when he went out. The Islanders have been red hot, but until they started sputtering, they lost to the Lightning. They got blanked in Buffalo by the Sabres.
See, I can understand losing games to Florida because, right, they're the division leader and all that, and they're a perennial playoff contender this year as well. But losing to the Islanders, losing to the Sabres, no, unacceptable. And the performance, the way they've looked in these losses,
losing
again,
against the Coyotes.
Oh my goodness, please, unacceptable all around.
Beyond unacceptable. Yeah, that's on the team itself, not on the patches, not on a bald haircut, not on any Zubaz or any bullshit, not on a goddamn goose. Fuck off of that bullshit, and stop throwing in the towel. The Red Wings are better than this. They can still climb back into it. Dylan Larkin's going to come back soon. I know he has to play better, but they need him. Like humans need oxygen. Yes, and nourishments. The Pistons, man, what's going on with them? I know they lost to the Heat, but they've won 3 out of the last 5, 3 of 4 before the loss to the Heat, 108-95. The Pistons are 12-54. The Washington Wizards, 11-55.
I think it shows. I mean, it is quite funny that the Pistons in the same year, we've mentioned this before, but it bears to mention again. The same season that the Pistons set their own personal all-time losing streak record, and yet they could still not finish with the worst record in the league. We know they're not going to finish with the worst record of all time, which is saying something. So doing this, I guess is some form of progress. But in all seriousness, I think what we've seen this past few stretch of games is Cade Cunningham playing the steady hand that he has, being the type of productive leader that he needs to be for this team. Jaden Ivey, when he's on fire, he's the perfect duo mate to go with Cade. He had the 34 points against the Nets the other week or so. Again, other players, we already mentioned Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren. I think the other night he had a 20-20 game. Those are your core 4 pieces that obviously you want to build around. But let's not forget some of these players that are surrounding them, like Fontecchio, that they acquired in one of those trade deadline deals that they made. He has been, frankly, proven to be a godsend with how he's able to shoot the ball, especially from 3, and how whenever he's on the floor with Cade, his plus-minus numbers are usually in the right direction. Same thing for the team in general. So I'm quite impressed to an extent that you see elements of when this team, when they're working so well that you wish you had seen some of this earlier in the season. But, you still have it's a matter of living and learning and figuring out what works best throughout the course of a season. Troy Weaver's still in the hot seat to an extent, I would say, but I think he did a good job with a couple of moves at the trade deadline. So
Speaking,
it's proving its dividends here late in the season, and it wants to give you something to have some level of confidence on for next year.
yeah, and Troy Weaver got into a heated argument with a fan. Yeah, and he threatened to beat the fan's ass before the fan just told him that he sucks at his job. That was uploaded by P Sharma 112 on TikTok. By the way, it was reposted on our TikTok at Michigan_Truth. You could see it on our TikTok. It was just an unprofessional move by Troy Weaver, threatening
Beyond unprofessional, because no matter what that fan is saying, he may be drunk, he may be an idiot, he may be loud or whatever,
but
but
the fan was right.
A, he was right. B, he bought a ticket. As long as he's not throwing shit onto the floor or being nasty or abusive, verbally abusive to the players or whatever, he's got a right to say whatever the hell he wants. And like you said, he was telling the truth, saying nothing but facts. This team won only 70 plus games, and they've lost over 200 during his tenure as Pistons GM. When you see the fact that you got an absolute bust in Killian Hayes, who, by the way, Monty Williams seemed so dead set at playing at 31 minutes a night over Jaden Ivey for the majority of this season, for God's sakes, it just was not. It has not worked out to where it's deemed as being acceptable, because it hasn't been. And frankly, you're lucky that you have an owner in Tom Gores that's willing to tolerate this bull crap, because frankly, Weaver, you would make an argument he should have been fired earlier, if fired at all. So the fact that he's able to still hold on to his job so far after this, I think speaks to the level of patience, I would say, that Tom Gores is having in him, if not obliviousness. But it also speaks to the pressures of this season specifically. He's aware of it, but he's letting it affect him in the worst way. You could still listen. You're well within your power. That is essentially your building. You can have that fan removed, no problem. Just mention security. Hey, that guy, he's getting out. I think he's exercising his right to free speech or whatever, but I think he's getting out of hand, getting too abrasive. Just remove him. That's it. That's all you could have said. It's still there would have been no need to go back and forth with them, and obviously not to threaten the guy, which from an optics case and other reasons is already just gives this a bad look on top of a bad look. So doing all this, knowing that your team has been putrid, essentially for the duration of your tenure, not a good look at all. And he's lucky, frankly, that he wasn't fired for that.
Right, exactly. So, speaking of basketball, the Michigan Wolverines fired Juwan Howard at the appropriate time after finishing the regular season 8-24. Howard, 82, 67 in 5 seasons. That's still a pretty good record, but it still could have been better had it been turned around reversely. But that's pretty much all we need to talk about.
I mean, you listen. The writing essentially has been on the wall for the majority of this season. I think you can go back to the incident in December in the training room between Howard and John Sanderson, that involved Howard's son yelling at a trainer. Sanderson had to get involved. Apparently, then Howard got involved. There was a confrontation of sorts, at least if you believe Sanderson's side of Sanderson's account of the incident. Juwan Howard has yet to publicly comment on it, instead of referring to the statement that had been put out by the university in regards to the investigation to the matter. It was just an ugly mess, and from that point on, it was just like, okay, this guy is dead man walking. You can argue that he should have been fired during the season. Like, for example, Ohio State, they fired their coach midway through the year, and they got better as a result. You could have seen something like that be a potential turning point for this Michigan Wolverines team, but they didn't. They decided to stay the course, and it proved to be their ultimate detriment. If you're Warren Manuel, at least you can say that, hey, no, I didn't fire this guy in the middle of the season, but look what letting him finish out the year did or has done to your program as a result. These past 3 years or so have been embarrassing, flat out embarrassing. Um, when you consider the fact that what he was taking over, what he was given, what he was handed to by John Beeline, and the start to his tenure that he had, going to tournaments, going to Sweet 16s, going to Elite Eights, having players like Hunter Dickinson and Isaiah Livers on your squad, to now doing this, just uninspired play, selfish play, no team play involved. Everybody wants to get theirs. Culture and everything is just completely blah. It is an absolute floor. It's beyond floor. It's at the basement level of confidence of what you want to have in a program right now. And frankly, with this next hire, you got to find a way to try to steer that turbulent tide as much as possible. The thing is, Ward Manuel's in charge, and I doubt Michigan fans are going to be optimistic that he's going to hire the right choice to be for Juwan Howard's replacement. This was a move that was frankly well overdone, a long time coming. It should have happened. It needed to happen. And now we can all just move on, thankfully. Appreciate you, Juwan, for your time as a player here. Appreciate you for what you were able to do as a coach early on. But it's clear now between things getting out of hand from both a professional and a personal standpoint, and the fact that, hey, you yourself had, heart surgery in this past offseason. This is just the right move to make for all sides involved, period.
All business, nothing personal. And by the way, the Michigan State Spartans lost to the Purdue Boilermakers 67-62 in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten men's basketball tournament. They beat Minnesota the day before that in the first round, but that's the way it works. Spartans are going to get into the big dance, probably like a low seed in one of the four regions.
I could see them being an 8 or 9 seed.
Me too.
It just depends on what region that they're going to be lined up in.
We'll keep our eyes open. So, the one last team to cover, the Tigers pitcher Jackson Jobe may be promoted soon after, from what I hear, after throwing 100-plus mile-an-hour heat to blow away the Minnesota Twins offense in a 1-0 victory early this week in Grapefruit League play in Lakeland. My goodness, Jackson Jobe has got nasty stuff and powerful heat.
He does. He has a tremendous fastball that I guess you could say averages out at about 99, 100 miles per hour. Like you mentioned, it can go beyond that. I think at one point it even touched 102. So it's good to see a guy who can work innings, work in the bullpen, be that late relief guy that has that type of fastball that may be unhittable to hit for some people. But it all comes down to control, and it helps that he's got a nice cutter as well. That I think he averages about 94, 95 miles on himself on just a cutter. So he's got those two pitches in his arsenal. I will say, knock on wood, and I hate to be bringing this up for Tigers fans, but everyone remembers the case of Joel Zumaya. If you don't know, people, Google it. You'll laugh and cry and probably shout out some expletives at the same time at his story. But long story short, as long as Jobe doesn't overdo it, as long as he's used properly enough to where he's not overwearing himself out with that type of velocity, hopefully it doesn't become another Joel Zumaya situation. But you are excited of what this kid can potentially bring to your bullpen, provided that if he keeps this up, you can see him being a potential call up. I would say after the second, late in the second half, around the September 1st call ups maybe. But that depends on his progress and what he does in the minors throughout this year leading up to that point. But still, you like what you see.
Yeah. Speaking of which, the Tigers starting pitching in spring training has recorded 23 strikeouts and only allowed 7 hits and 1 run in 20 innings pitched, including Kenta Maeda.
That's what you. Well, you know what? That's the type.
And Casey Mize. He shut out the Yankees. The Yankees, man.
That's the type of results that you want to be optimistic for from your spring training. You want to see it as a preview of what you can do in the regular season. And frankly, like I said, knowing that you are in the worst division of baseball, knowing that you were at some point last season seen as a potential dark horse competitor for the division title, to me, I wouldn't be surprised to see this team to see, hey, if we win a few more games than we're supposed to, have reliable enough pitching and make sure that our offense is a complete dog shit, you know, you can make some noise in terms of being that spoiler team in the division at least. I don't know if it's going to be enough. I don't even think it's going to be enough to get a wild card. I think it's a good situation where if you want to make the playoffs, you got to win the division. But it comes down to whether or not Chris Illich is wanting and ready to make the certain moves at certain deadlines when it's necessary, and giving AJ Hinch the right roster, and that's necessary in order to compete and potentially win.
Yes. Just one small problem as we enter the super ugly stat of the week. Javier Baez,
Mm-hmm.
0.77 batting average, 2 RBIs, a 180 OPS in 26 at bats.
How many strikeouts? There's got to be some strikeouts behind that. My God.
Oh, man, I'm looking it up right now. Oh, drat. Spring training. Stats. Hang on a minute. Spring training. I'm looking, man. I'm looking. Strikeouts. 11 right now in spring training.
Good God. That's almost half of your at-bats. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be another fun season with him in his spot in the lineup. If they don't find a way to DFA his ass at some point of the year, I'll be irritated, because he's just a waste of a roster spot at this point. Waste of money, waste of salary, waste of a roster spot. If I could, I would put him as a damn healthy scratch for all 162 games this year. The dude is
because
useless.
he's an arrogant sack of shit.
And he's useless. He's absolutely useless in the lineup.
Yeah. He's a shell of himself when he was with the 2016 World Series champion Chicago Cubs.
And that was 8 years ago, people. Now we're oh my goodness.
Yep. So we ended all team coverage with a bang, I tell you. So what did we learn?
We learned that the Lions are serious about wanting to improve their strengths at the necessary positions, strengthening their run defense, trying to make improvements with their secondary, and frankly, bringing back key players that they know are important to their scheme, to their identity, to their culture, and could be a preview of what they can do or what they have to do in the upcoming draft. We learned that the Pistons, again, any progress is better than no progress. To me, with the players that they brought in after the deadline to go with the core four that they have now, you're seeing some semblance of what could be a better improvement for 2024, 2025 for next season. It's
especially with Jalen Duren. Wow.
Yes, it's exactly. It's just a matter of A, will Troy Weaver still be here, and B, Monty Williams is going to have a couple come to Jesus talks with both the front office and with his players, because everyone has got to be on the same page if we want to right and steer this ship for next season. We learned that the Red Wings are continuing to crater. It could be an issue of what their mentality is at this point, not some stupid patch. And also, you got to remember they are doing this without their captain for the most part, but thankfully he is coming back soon. So they're still in the hunt, still in the chase for a playoff spot, but they've definitely got to play better than what they're showing right now.
Not done yet.
Yes, and what we learned also is that thankfully the Michigan basketball program is going to be going in a new direction for next year. This was a long time coming. Some would say overdue move, but it's a move that is finally being made, being done, and now it's just closing this chapter, thankfully, and just starting fresh for next season. And who else did I meant to mention? Oh yeah, Jackson Jobe. What we learned about him, potential, gem, I would say, of the future, provided that he stays healthy and is used in the right role, with a spot in the bullpen or late relief situation, depending on how he keeps his control and keeps his production going with his fastball and whatnot. So I would say, based on everything else and surrounding all that we've covered, that's what we've learned.
All right. Yep. Yeah, that's exactly everything. I have nothing else to add. So that is another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast in the can. I'm Taylor Phillips. He's Ed Smith. Follow the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Michigan_Truth, and like its Facebook page. Subscribe to its YouTube channel at the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Like our videos and turn on all notifications on the bell icon. Follow it and listen to it in audio form on Spreaker. Follow me on X, TikTok, and Instagram and YouTube at DT2Phillips with 2 L's. Follow Ed Smith on X, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at EdSmith313. Business shout-outs go to Athletico Physical Therapy on Woodward and Ferndale, the B4 Foundation, Cali Tickets. Call Mark Goldman at 877-225-8425, Mark Goldman, or visit CaliTickets.com. Creative Embroidery of Cadillac for designing the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast logo on my long sleeve shirt and T-shirt. Cuts by Melanie in Lake City. I have an appointment next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. The JC Youth Foundation. Let's roll with it. Rolled ice cream in Cadillac with the Irish the pot of gold Irish cream ice cream with toffee butterscotch. Oh my God. Follow them on TikTok at the Food Mafia LLC and on Instagram at the Food Mafia Rolled Ice Cream. Northern Star Event Rentals in Cadillac, 231-884-8195, and on Facebook, get a hold of Heather Krzyzewski for early bookings for open houses with bounce houses, inflatable water slides, and stuff like that. Tents, chairs, tables, other good stuff. Union Barber in Birmingham, United Food Service Solutions in Grand Ledge, Michigan, United Mobile Power Wash and Dry Ice Works in Southfield, and Well-Being with Catherine Palms. Our next episode is next Thursday at 10:30 p.m. Until then, for Ed Smith, I'm Taylor Phillips. Remember, we observe and detect the truth about Michigan sports because the truth is out there. Hit them with a high. Ta-ta.
Take care and stay safe, everyone.